1 week season.
1 week season, fam. La Familia. Welcome back. It is week 14. FanDuel Labs. My name is Mike Johnson. M Johnson 86 coming to you today. It is Wednesday. It is December. As you can see from my background, it is snowy and cold. I'm here in Wisconsin, but we are ready to rock. There is less than a third of the NFL season to go. We are coming off a week 13 that was a pretty wild week 13. There was a lot of 1 week season activity in the Bink channel on Discord with a lot of our members having some big scores. Shout out to Dabs, one of our active members. Took down the Octopus on DraftKings with a Bryce Young lineup. Loaded up on our boy Bucky Irving, Mike Evans, and hit on a lot of the core plays. Pretty cool to see, basically my whole player grid on some of those winning rosters. I didn't have the right combinations, but I'm glad that some of the Familia did, in fact. So with that, I will bring on my esteemed colleague, Maximus. How we doing?
Hey. Yeah, congrats to Dabs, and also congrats to Gridiron 70 on Thanksgiving. Seems like a month ago now, but the Green Bean Juke tournament that we were actually talking about on our show last week, I was sweating with him. I was actually in the top 10 with him for a while, but he had Josh Jacobs. He had 3 players left. I had 2. And so he finished first place, $10,000. Congrats to Gridiron on the FanDuel Green Bean Juke is what they called the contest.
And, it was a solo first too.
No sharing.
To do with
1,904 entrants. So
a lot of chalk hit on that day, so it was hard to create like a unique lineup. So huge shout out there, able to be optimal and unique, kind of the dynamic duo we are looking for in DFS. So yeah, certainly a big one there. It was an interesting week. It was a fun week. Kind of got the late games were like kind of slow, but then in the second half kind of picked up. And we've got 6 teams on bye this week, which once again, leaves us with a relatively small slate. I know in a couple weeks we've got, the Christmas slate, but like the last couple weeks of the year, and then I believe week 15 as well, it's going to be much bigger slates. So just different dynamics that we'll encounter on those weeks. But yeah, we are, back at it here, ready to rock. It's, a lot of stuff going on this week, which, I'm sure at some point we'll touch on when we're building our lineup, but obviously the 49ers backfield, that situation happening Sunday night, and then the severity of it not really being known when pricing and everything came out. And then we've got the, we've got the Monday night game that was wild with OWS favorite Jameis Winston. And then now, he's got a game against the Steelers who, Russell Wilson just threw for over 400 yards. So interesting because, you think of the Browns and Steelers as defensive stalwart type teams. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out and see where it all lines up. Jerry Jeudy with the huge 235-yard game, a career game. I saw that he jumped up from 30th in the league in receiving yards prior to week 13, and now he's 5th. So made quite the jump there. So a lot going on, smaller week, but a lot going on. And then, of course, if anyone that plays season-long fantasy or best ball, this is the last week to get into the playoffs for playoff format contests. So it will be interesting. It will be fun. And we'll see what we've got. So do you have anything you want to add, or do you want to hop right into it?
Yeah, your best ball teams are loving it if you have Jerry Jeudy now. So, and speaking of that, I know you put out a little bit of content, a little update in the best ball tab in our OWS Discord. And glad you put that in there, because if you have any teams that you think are in contention, it's the time to start monitoring that situation. But yeah, I'm really interesting week here. It looks like it's going to be a barbell approach at running back between value and high price that could both possibly be chalk, and kind of a pathway to fit him in. But is it the right approach to go about, actually? So yeah, it'll be interesting to cover this week.
For sure. All right, I'll go ahead and pull it up then. It doesn't really matter what we build in. I'll just go in the bomb again this week. And yeah, we'll take a look. So I'll let you kind of take the reins and tell me where you want to start, and we can just go from there and see where it takes us.
All right, sounds good. So I want to start with a team, well, actually a team and a game environment that I think can be sneaky this week. And there's a lot of good reasons, in my opinion, or ramifications why. I'm going to start with the team. We actually haven't built around this team on the show this year, amazingly. I kind of looked back. But this team is, for one, they're in contention to still win their division, amazingly. And they're playing well. They're playing against a team who has started to play well. And there's a huge narrative of the star receiver of this team going for a landmark feat by the end of the season once again. And so we're going to start with, on this team build, Baker Mayfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to pair him on this team with Mike Evans and Cade Otton. And then I want to bring it back with Jacoby Myers. So a couple things on all these. The Mike Evans narrative is alive and well for the 1,000-yard receiving season. I have some quotes from Baker Mayfield just from a few days ago, actually, where he literally says, I'm reading quote here, "It's huge just for the chances." Bucs quarterback Baker Mayfield said, "We talk about trying to get explosive plays in and somehow creating that. And we'll be trying to dial up some things within the scheme. When we have our one-on-one matchups with him, we need to take advantage of that." So clearly, based on, now Todd Bowles wasn't as blatant, of course, but there's definitely I think a reality that they're, when it's feasible, trying to get Mike Evans as involved as possible to get that 1,000-yard receiving season. And at the same time, they're completely in play now to win the NFC South, now that we've seen a huge drop-off with the Atlanta Falcons. So I have, again, Baker, Mike Evans, Cade Otton. Cade Otton's dropped off a little bit as far as the fantasy points, but the targets are still there. I mean, he's 3 out of his last 4 games. He's averaged 7, 8, 11, 10. He had the one game against the Giants where he only had 3 targets, but, he's still, without Godwin in there, part of the offense that gives a little bit of value at 5,600. And then the bring back of Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers has just been a target monster. He's kind of come up as the season's gone along, and dare I say, Aiden O'Connell is, in his return back, has been looking pretty good. But we have Jacoby Myers with 11 and 15 targets over the last 2 weeks. And I definitely see this being the type of game where it could be a back and forth affair. And so that's where I'd like to start with this build, and then I will throw it back to you.
Yeah, I think, a couple things. One, you bring up Evans and Otton. And so Evans came back from injury after their week 11 bye, and he had kind of a ho-hum game against the Giants. They just dominated, wasn't competitive at all. It was his first game back. They kind of, they eased him in. So last week against the Panthers, Bryce Young's been playing great, kept it competitive, kept it close where, he had 12 targets. Otton had 7. He actually, there was a couple missed targets. There was 1 or 2 more times they tried to go to him. And, one time there was an offensive penalty. One time there was a defensive penalty, I think, but the official targets still were, they combined for 19 targets, 12 for Evans, 7 for Otton. And Mayfield threw the ball 33 times. So you're looking at just under a 60% target share between the two. The Raiders are they're not as bad of a defense, I think, as maybe on the surface some people might think, but they're also, they're not great. And the Bucks, just the way they play, they have a team total of over 26 this week, which is, I believe, second or third on the slate, behind I think it's third behind the Bills and the Eagles. So, this is certainly a spot. Bucky Irving had the big game last week. But yeah, I mean, you just look at how condensed things are. And with Otten's price coming down, you're looking at 14K combined. So, really you're looking at like 40-ish points or more between the two of them. So not hard to envision Evans having a big game. Otten basically just needs to have a few catches and fall in the end zone. And then obviously Mayfield has had a terrific season, kind of an underrated season, I think. Last couple weeks has kind of slowed down. He had the rough one against the Niners, and then the last couple weeks have been a little ho-hum. Have to watch the injury status. He got cleated last week, I think was the issue, but he's all good. But if you look at, earlier in the season, he's got a 29, a 31, 23, 32, 32, 27. Obviously Godwin had something to do with that as well, but he can make plays with his legs. He can add, he'll add a rushing TD here or there. And just the way the Bucks defense works, they operate basically as a pass funnel. So they speed games up and it results in higher play volume. So, you could see Mayfield up over 35 targets. Pass attempts. That would mean you're looking at 20 to 22 targets between Evans and Otten, which is, again, if the touchdowns come, you are rolling here. And then Myers is really interesting. He's a guy who we talk so much about how important touchdowns are on FanDuel, but he's a guy that hasn't really scored touchdowns. He actually, to start his career, he had like some crazy streak without a touchdown. But the last 4 games, you could see he has 43 targets in his last 4 games, no touchdowns. So his price is still only at 6,700. But the thing is, it's just variance. He can score touchdowns. So when you're getting that kind of production without touchdowns, that's the type of guy, that mid-range wide receiver that can, when those touchdowns hit, that can kind of be a slate changer, and it kind of fits perfectly here. So I do really like this stack that you're starting with. Good job.
Well, Myers is definitely a regression candidate. I was thinking that too for touchdowns at some point. So,
yep. And so, that leaves us with a few things. First, I'll just throw in a defense so that we can have a little bit better idea where we're going with the rest of our roster. We can always adjust later if we need to. I'm going to start with the Vikings defense. They're priced up a little bit, which probably keeps ownership down some. Kirk Cousins did not look good last week. There was some next gen stat about his velocity on his passes that basically it's the first game that a quarterback has failed to throw a pass over 36 miles an hour or something like that. He had that ugly pick 6 against the Chargers, and he really struggles against defenses that generate a lot of pressure. And there are not really, the Vikings generate as much, if not more, pressure than any team in the league. So in that return to Minnesota, obviously Brian Flores is going to know all of Cousins' weak points and how to exploit him. So I think that is, kind of the defense I'm targeting on most rosters that I'll hand build. And doesn't mean I'll play them on every roster, but I'll start there and adjust only if and when I need to. So we'll start there. And then obviously at running back, the big news this week, Isaac Guerendo, they had CMC done for the season. Jordan Mason got hurt later in that game. So you have Garendo here at, this is the type of thing we used to get on FanDuel a lot with how they used to price stuff. We'd get running backs who go down, and the backup running back would be priced in the 5Ks. Sometimes it was a good matchup. Sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes it was a talented guy. Sometimes it wasn't. Garendo is in basically close to the nut matchup for a running back. The Bears' pass defense has been pretty solid, and their run defense has just been gashed. I mean, even last week, the Lions running backs didn't get in the end zone, but they were running all over them until they kind of hit the brakes in the second half and got conservative. So, I mean, Garendo's in basically the best possible spot, and I don't know what his ownership will come in, but I'm not sure that it matters. He's at, like, if you don't play him this week, you're betting on an injury, is basically how I'm looking at it. Because, I mean, even in, like, worst case scenario, he's going to score, like, 9 or 10 points. He's going to catch 2 or 3 passes. He's going to have 70 or 80 total yards unless he gets hurt. That's really the only way that I see that playing out, because he's been really good too. He's been really impressive. Physically, he's a specimen. 6 foot, 225, runs a 4.33 40. Every time he's been on the field, he's produced. He's averaging like 6 yards a carry. He should have 2 more touchdowns. He slid twice at the end of games to ice games when he could have got in. So, I mean, he's as locked in of a play as I think we've seen this season, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's looked really explosive too when he has been on the field. And as we say, when it comes to chalk, I mean, running back chalk, when it makes sense, you're willing to eat more than like another position. So, and then 5,200, it's almost like a free square. Obviously, it's going to be, everybody and their brother's probably going to have them, but it's the way you build your team otherwise to where that's not as much of a factor. So, yeah, I agree. Obviously, just a common sense play this week.
So then the other running back that, I mean, these two stand out far above everyone else this week. It almost feels like too easy, is Saquon Barkley. You can see him. He's at 10K this week facing the Panthers. They just gave up a 30-point game to Bucky Irving. Their worst ranked run defense in the league. Barkley, the thing that stands out about this, so there's 2 ends to this. One, the Philadelphia defense is real good. I mean, they were impressive what they did to the Ravens last week. So from the standpoint of, he's the highest priced player on the slate by far. He's going to come in with a decent amount of ownership. And Garendo being on the slate and priced where he is going to make guys like Barkley and Kamara's ownership go up, because it's going to be a lot easier, just like we are here. And that's the thing to think about when you're building lineups, is sometimes you've got to think about what seems easy and so straightforward to you. A lot of other people are going to see too. So you've really got to think through it. Doesn't mean we can't play him, but Barkley and Garendo are going to be on a lot of rosters together. Again, that's fine. You just got to think through it. As far as the actual spot, if the Philadelphia defense dominates, because they're a lot better than the Bucs. We saw earlier this year when Barkley against the Giants, there was that clip of his coach asking him if he wanted to go back in and get, like, it was like his career high or the rushing record against his old team. And he said, no, just let the young guys go. So he is at 1,500 yards, rushing yards on the season, just under 1,800 total yards. And they've got like 2,000 yards in their sights. They've got, the NFL rushing records in their sights. So, like, there is not going to be a better spot, I don't think, where if they wanted to tack on another 200-yard game like he had against the Rams, it's a pretty easy spot to do it, right? On the flip side of it, you still have Jalen Hurts. Like, if they get to the 1, at the, are they just going to do the tush push? If they get up, if the Panthers have a couple early turnovers and they have short fields, so he can't accumulate as many yards. If they get up 24-3, 27-6, are they going to put him on ice because, they've got team goals and he's, there's two sides to it. I could see, we had what we thought was a smash spot against Dallas 4 weeks ago. And he disappointed in that spot, which it felt like very similar in like how bad their defense was on paper and how good he looked. So really, I mean, this becomes, which narrative do you kind of want to buy into? So, I've kind of covered every aspect of the play. So do you want to put him on this roster or not? I'll let you decide.
Yeah, and also to your point about when he went up against the Cowboys, Carolina's playing a lot better too. So that's something to take into account overall as a team. They seem to have had a new energy now with Bryce back, but I think it's carried over to the whole team. So something to keep in mind. I do want to put Barkley on this particular team. If you're doing multiple entries, guys, and you think these offenses are going to succeed, there's different, you can obviously differentiate on other teams and, if the story plays out a different way, but the offense is still producing, and that way you're maybe moving up on the field, being not with the chalk on maybe another roster, but on this one, I think both these guys you're going to have on a portion of your rosters based on how many you're going to play. So yeah, let's go Horrendo and Barkley, and I do have a wide receiver and a flex candidate that we could actually makes sense, that's realistic at the price range that we have left. And so at wide receiver, I want to go ahead. Now, definitely watch the injury status of Cedric Tillman. He's still in concussion protocol, so not sure if he's going to be ready to come back by Sunday or not. But at 5,600, we have Elijah Moore, who's going to be in a game. You mentioned it earlier in the show about Russell Wilson and kind of the amazing way the Steelers, who are not known to be that type of team, was involved in a shootout with a division rival. And then here we are a week later, another division rival. The quarterback, Jameis Winston's going to chuck it basically no matter what. Great spot for the Steelers defense too, actually. But I could see at this price range, a couple of candidates. Elijah Moore is one of them. Amari Cooper is at 5,700. You would think that now, they're going to be in better weather. They're in the Dome against the Rams. Could be a competitive game there. I think this could be a week where Cooper starts to become more involved with the offense, with Josh Allen maybe designing some more stuff for him. So those are two routes you could go and keep Barkley in. And so I'll throw those shout outs to those players to finish this build. However, if we don't want to go with Barkley and you want to try to do an alternate of this, then we could go to some maybe higher up spots at a receiver and flex.
Yeah. So first we'll look through it this way. So, we've got, who'd you say? Elijah Moore
and Amari Cooper.
Yeah. And I love the Amari call. I'm actually I'm really, really high on him this week. This is not mathematically backed, but that play was pretty sweet on Sunday night when he pitched it back to Allen and he got the passing and receiving. The Rams have been dusted up by perimeter receivers this season. They've obviously they struggled against Barkley, and some really good running games have had good games against them. But they're pretty solid kind of in the middle of the field where they get beat. MVS had Marquez Valdes-Scantling had another touchdown against them last week. And they've been dusted up several times on the perimeter this year. Amari, I think that he's going to have a game with Josh Allen. He's going to have a game at some point. And the price is so low and so easy to there's not that much opportunity cost with him this week. So, I love having him on that build. I love having him Uh-oh. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry, I was freezing.
Yeah, it looked like there was something frozen for a second. Well, you're in Wisconsin, so,
Yeah. The
hard for
winds
the
are
court.
cold. Yeah, so I love Amari on this build. And it really on any build, I just think that priced at under 6K, I think him or Keon Coleman, if Coleman comes back, I think, there's a good chance. And like I said, it's just like a little bit of narrative, like on my part. Like I feel like he earned a lot of love from Josh Allen with that pitch back to him. That was a pretty sweet play. So just from that standpoint, I think that it is, I think he makes sense as a guy who eventually is going to hit for a big game. And we know he has like a monster ceiling. Like we know Amari has a monster ceiling. So yeah, I like that a good bit. And really, I would say keep him on here regardless. Really what it comes down to. So I think what it comes down to is let's put Amari in at receiver. And then, so it comes down to, do we want Barkley with either Elijah Moore, or you could go with Rome Odunze, who has kind of been the like odd man out for the Bears receivers, like astonishingly, like for the type of receiver he is. He's only got one touchdown this year, and it was in week 3. Doesn't have one since then. And like, again, similar to Amari, like big play type receiver, still priced low. I'm just going to keep going back to that well at some point. So him, I think obviously Moore makes some sense. So then it becomes, do we want to do that or the alternative? And really the decision point is, do you play Barkley and a guy like that? Or do you go down at running back? For me, it's, do you go down at running back and then play 3 running backs? Because I think that's kind of the best justification for going away from Barkley, in my opinion. So if we left Barkley off this roster and we had Amari, where do you have thoughts on where you would want to go with 2 running backs, probably putting a running back in the flex?
And you're putting Amari Cooper in as wide receiver 3.
Amari's in at receiver, yeah.
Well, if playing small field, it could be a case to overstack the Bucs and put Bucky Irving in there too at running back. Let's see what that would leave with. That leaves you with 7,900 in the flex. And although, you have James Conner. He could have a big game this week at home against Seattle. There's also Kenneth Walker. I don't really know what's happened with him. You think he's probably due to produce. He's definitely been kind of, not having a great season over the past 3 or 4 weeks, but this is a game, Seattle and Arizona, obviously for the division, another one that's a lot of stakes on the line for both teams. So that could be one, more of a small field thing, in my opinion. If you overstack, if you did that, you have the whole Bucs offense as far as that went. And then you have an option of either Connor or Walker if we went the 3 running back approach, which I agree too. If you're going to go away from Barkley, you're almost going to need maybe 2 running backs to counter the possible production or the possible ceiling that Barkley can provide on any given week. So that'd be one way on the face of it. If we were doing the running back and running back flex. Don't know if we really need to go any further down, but I'm sure there are candidates further down. Let me see here. Tony Pollard, 7,500 against Jacksonville. Could be realistic.
So here, let me throw this one to you. We know Garendo is going to be like wildly. He's going to have a crazy amount of ownership, right? So what if we did this? What if we added DeAndre Swift? The Roshan Johnson, I believe, sustained a concussion. Yes, he did last week. I'm not sure. We're recording this before practices start, but he's coming off a concussion. They're out of the playoffs. He's a younger guy. Usually players sit out the next week. So I mean, Swift at this lower price tag, and I believe Fred Warner. Well, I think it was just cramps, but the Niners are kind of reeling a little bit, and I could see Swift. This is going to be their first game without Eberflus, so they could come out like a much more aggressive team than they have in the past. So when you think about ways that you can play Guerrero uniquely, playing him with the opposing running back, DeAndre Swift, who actually is very involved as a pass catcher, would make a lot of sense, if you ask me. And then what that would allow you to do is you could come off K. Dot and you could go right up to our boy, Trey McBride.
He's talk about a regression candidate for a touchdown. He would be like the top of the leaderboard for that. I had another thought too, but it didn't quit. We'd have to change the defense, and that would be if we put Swift in, we could also kind of do a player block of Herendo and Kittle with Swift maybe, and that would be an interesting way to stack that game. But we'd have to change the defense though, so I don't know if it would work out. But it's something to think about. Obviously, maybe I'm letting my best ball bias come into play there because I have Kittle needs to have a big week for me in best ball. But yeah, that could be maybe another route if you wanted to put Swift in the flex, have a Herendo, Kittle, Swift, and maybe adjust one other aspect.
Or from that standpoint, you could, again, to the idea of, you could play the crazy high-owned guy, and at his price, even if he has 9-10 points, like, it's fine. You could still win. He basically would have to get hurt. Or like several other guys really go nuts. And even that, like at 5,200, like it's just so cheap that it's kind of hard to pass, because if at his price, if he goes for 20, 25 points, like you are really sledding uphill to try to catch up. So where I'm going with this is you've got Jawan Jennings, 6,400. Wouldn't be hard to get to him. And then you could come down either from the Vikings. You could look at maybe the Saints against Drew Lock or Tommy DeVito. Or you could stick with the Vikings and, just drop down to like Jonnu Smith or Travis Kelce in the Sunday night game. So a lot of options there, with just kind of how you want to play that out. I think for our purposes, I'll kind of leave it here. But yeah, I think that, again, I think the, what do you think? Are you good with this roster?
Yeah, I'm loving we just kind of laid out, guys, a couple different routes that are, it's like multi-entry gold here, I think, with where you can go and kind of bend and twist the salary. And obviously later in the week, when we get into knowing a little bit more and where the field tendencies are going to be going to ownership wise, maybe adjust accordingly at that point. Yeah, no, I'm down with this, or even the prior one where we had Barkley, of course. That works too. So
yeah.
I think the other one was Barkley. We had Otten at tight end to finish that Baker stack.
Yep.
And then we had Amari, in that case, it'd have to be Amari in the flex, and then Elijah Moore as wide receiver 3. But either of those are completely viable.
Or you could play Rome in the flex there.
Or Rome. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So, really, it just comes down to, dealer's choice. Personally, I like for this particular one, I kind of like just rolling with the non-Barkley one. Trey McBride has been just destroying 27 targets the last 2 weeks. Still doesn't have a receiving touchdown this year. Josh Allen has a receiving touchdown. Trey McBride does not, which is kind of crazy to think about. But the thing I like about this, again, I think Barkley is like an inflection point. So if you're not going to play him, we've got Guerrero. I don't think we need more discussion on him. Irving as part of that Bucs group, that whole Bucs offense stack. And basically what we're saying there is we think the Bucs score 30 plus points, score 4 or 5 touchdowns, and you're going to get, you're going to get a game like last week where Bucky and Evans are the centerpieces of the offense, they accumulate most of it. Obviously you would be looking for a little more out of Baker, get a couple touchdowns, maybe not all the turnovers. But certainly, like, we've seen that play out before. Very viable there. And then Swift at 6,300 is a guy where, he had 4 straight games earlier in the year where he had 19 to 26 FanDuel points. So at his price, that you can get a low 20 score pretty reasonably, especially if Roschon Johnson's out, and kind of make the Guerendo play much more unique, right? I think that, and I think there's a lot of correlation there too, because Swift has a good on the ground matchup, but also he's used as a receiver, and the Niners are pretty good in the secondary. So I would think, if they do play from behind, which kind of would be the expectation, should get a few receptions there, but a cheap guy that you could get at like an 80% snap share and gives you a unique roster construction, I think fits really, really well there. So yeah, and again, to kind of tie that with a bow on the Barkley thing, Barkley could have a 35-point game, and if Swift gets you 18 to 20 for nearly 4K savings, you can be okay. If he gets 50 like he did against the Rams, you're probably done. But he could have a really big game. He could have a 200-yard game, and if he only scores 1 touchdown, you're still probably all right.
Yeah, and if Roschon doesn't return from that concussion, you don't have those swipes at the goal line that he tends to do away from Swift. I just looked at the running back. There's like literally nobody behind Swift. You have Darrington Evans and you have Travis Homer. Who I guess
Homer was playing a little bit because they traded Khalil Herbert. Yeah, if Johnson's out, I mean, Swift is going to get. I mean, he's close to a lock for 20+ touches, in my opinion. So, yeah.
And opposing running backs in a game environment, we've talked about that for a while on 1 week season. That's a viable strategy that I don't think the field probably does as often or thinks to do as often. So I think it makes it you kind of have to chalk with Guerendo, but overall you're using him in a way that's a unique construction from what a lot of the field could be doing with him. So.
Yeah, and I do think that just the way general psychology works, even if Johnson's out and let's say Swift gets, because of his salary and projected usage, gets like if him and Guerendo are both projecting for a decent amount of ownership, I think it'll be like an either or for most people. Not that many people will play both of them, or at least not without maybe, having like Caleb Williams, like a Bears stack opposite Guerendo. So yeah, I like this roster a good bit.
Agreed.
All right. Well, that will do it for us then. We are just under 40 minutes. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, of course, as always, Maximus, for giving us a nice starting point to build from there. I had been looking at that game from the Las Vegas side a little bit. So I like that you brought it back to, the team that we expect to score more points. Sometimes we can overthink those spots. So with that, don't forget to check out our site. If you're not already on oneweekseason.com, our rest of season pricing is great. I talked about it before. You can access, if you join Inner Circle, you can access the whole year's worth of podcasts that has all of JM's Winner Circle trainings. You can get in our Discord, kind of interact with everybody, see what we're all about, and see if, it's something you want to check out for next season. But we are heating up. I think like 2 of the last 3 weeks, we've been like cleaning up on the leaderboards. Bing's channel's been popping. So check us out. We'd love to have you. We're always welcoming new colleagues, I should say. So with that, I am Mike. He is Maximus. Thank you so much, and we will see you at the top of the leaderboards and see you next week.